You pay your bills on time. You avoid debt. You save a little each month. You don't make reckless decisions. And on paper, your financial life looks responsible. But something feels off. You're working harder, earning more, doing everything right. And yet, freedom still feels far away. You tell yourself, these things take time. And that sounds reasonable, until you notice something uncomfortable. People who seem less careful, less disciplined, less responsible, are somehow moving faster. And that's when the quiet question appears. If you're doing everything right, why does progress feel so slow? Because some of the habits that look responsible aren't building wealth. They're building stability. And stability can quietly cost you years. But here's what makes this dangerous. None of these habits look like mistakes. They look smart. They feel mature. They even earn social approval, which means you don't question them. You repeat them. And over time, you build a life that looks responsible, but moves slower than you think. These are the top 10 money habits that look responsible, but quietly delay your freedom. And the deeper we go, the more uncomfortable this gets. Because by the end, this won't just be about money, it'll be about the version of you you've slowly become. 10. Always waiting until you can afford it. You don't buy things impulsively. You wait. You save first. You think carefully. You make sure it's responsible. This feels smart. It feels disciplined. But something subtle happens. You only move when things feel safe. You only invest when you feel ready. You only take risks when uncertainty disappears. And here's the problem. By the time something feels safe, the upside is smaller. The opportunity is older. The growth has already happened. But it still feels responsible because you avoided risk. But here's the quiet cost. You also avoided acceleration. And over time, you become someone who moves carefully, while others move early. And this is where it gets uncomfortable. You start telling yourself you're being responsible, but you're actually being late. Late to investing, late to opportunities, late to ownership, and late is expensive. Because wealth doesn't reward careful timing. It rewards time itself. But waiting feels responsible. So you keep doing it. And slowly, you become cautious with everything. And that's when the next habit appears. 9. Prioritizing stability over optionality. You choose the stable job, the predictable income, the secure path. This feels responsible. You reduce uncertainty. You avoid volatility. You build consistency. But stability comes with a quiet trade-off. Stability reduces urgency, and urgency creates growth. Without urgency, you stop searching. You stop experimenting. You stop pushing. And this doesn't happen dramatically. It happens slowly. You become comfortable. You become reliable. You become stable. But here's the subtle shift. You're no longer building freedom. You're building dependence. Your life adapts to your salary. Your expenses match your income. Your decisions become safer. And slowly, your optionality disappears. You can't leave easily. You can't pivot easily. You can't take risks easily. Because stability created comfort, and comfort created constraints. But it still feels responsible, because everything looks controlled. Until one day, you realize you're stable, but not free. And that realization leads to the next habit. 8. Saving without ownership. You save consistently. Every month, your bank balance grows slowly. This feels responsible. You're disciplined. You're patient. You're doing what you're supposed to do. But something quietly limits your progress. You're saving, not owning. Cash grows slowly. Ownership compounds. And the difference isn't obvious at first. Savings feel safe. Ownership feels uncertain. So you choose safety. But here's what changes. Your money starts moving slower than time. Inflation moves quietly. Assets grow quietly. Opportunity expands quietly. And your savings stay still. And this is where it becomes uncomfortable. You're working for money, but your money isn't working for you. You're building effort instead of leverage. And over time, effort becomes exhausting because your progress depends entirely on you, your hours, your energy, your career, which means you're not building wealth. You're maintaining stability. And stability is slower than you think. And that's when another responsible habit appears. 7. Avoiding unnecessary risk. You don't chase trends. You don't gamble. You avoid risky decisions. This feels responsible. But here's the quiet misunderstanding. Not all risk is reckless. Some risk is required. And when you avoid all risk, you also avoid asymmetry. You avoid upside. You avoid breakthrough. And this happens slowly. You stay in familiar environments. You choose predictable investments. You delay uncertain opportunities. And over time, Your financial life becomes smooth, stable, predictable, but also limited. And here's the uncomfortable part. You're not protecting your future. You're flattening it. You're reducing downside, but also reducing upside. And wealth requires uneven outcomes. It requires some things to work extremely well. But you avoid that possibility because you're being responsible. And this is where the tension builds. You're minimizing mistakes, but also minimizing breakthroughs. And over time, you become someone who avoids failure at the cost of avoiding success. And that realization leads to the midpoint, where this stops being about money and starts being about identity. 6. This was never about money. You thought you were building a responsible life. Careful decisions, predictable progress, low-risk choices. Everything looked mature. Everything looked stable. But something still felt slow. And now, the pattern starts connecting, waiting until you can afford it, choosing stability over optionality, saving without ownership, avoiding risk. None of these look like mistakes. But together, they create something else. They create a version of you that optimizes for comfort over growth. And this is where it gets uncomfortable. Because this was never about money. It's about the version of you that chose safety over expansion. Again, and again, and again. Not dramatically, quietly. One responsible decision at a time. You didn't take the uncertain opportunity. You didn't invest early. You didn't push into discomfort. You stayed controlled, measured, responsible. But here's the uncomfortable realization. You didn't build a risky life. You built a predictable one. And predictable rarely becomes free, because freedom requires uneven decisions. Moments that feel uncomfortable, moves that feel premature, risks that don't look responsible. But you avoided those because you were being smart. And this is where the identity shift happens. You're not just someone who makes responsible decisions. You're someone who avoids acceleration. And that changes everything, because now the next habits become inevitable. 5. Gradually expanding lifestyle with income. You earn more. Your life improves slightly. A nicer apartment, better car, more comfortable spending. This feels responsible. You're not overspending. You're just upgrading slowly. But here's the quiet shift. Your freedom moves further away every time your income increases, because your lifestyle grows with your salary. Your baseline expands. Your obligations increase, and slowly, your income stops creating leverage. It starts maintaining your life. And this is where it gets dangerous. Raises stop feeling like progress. They feel necessary. Your new lifestyle depends on them. Your financial life becomes heavier, more comfortable, but harder to escape. And over time, you become someone earning more, but not moving faster, because lifestyle expansion absorbs acceleration. And this is where tension builds. You're not building freedom. You're upgrading your cage, and it still looks responsible, because nothing is reckless, but everything is heavier. And heavy lives move slowly. 4. Choosing predictability over growth. You choose the stable path again, the predictable promotion, the safe company, the familiar industry. This feels responsible. You're reducing uncertainty, but something subtle happens. Predictable paths rarely accelerate. They grow slowly, incrementally, comfortably. And this is where the contrast appears. Some people jump industries, take uncertain roles, pursue asymmetric opportunities. They look less responsible, but their trajectories change faster. And this is where the tension deepens. You're optimizing for stability, while others optimize for acceleration. And acceleration compounds. Slow growth compounds too, but far slower than you think. And this is where it becomes uncomfortable. You're not stuck because you're irresponsible. You're stuck because you're responsible. Because responsible decisions often avoid volatility. But volatility creates breakthroughs. And over time, you become someone who chooses certainty, even when uncertainty offers leverage, and that identity becomes difficult to break. Because now, your life depends on predictability, and that's when the next habit appears. 3. Becoming dependent on your income. Your career improves, your salary grows, your life stabilizes, everything looks successful. But something quietly changes. Your expenses match your income, your commitments grow, your obligations increase, and slowly, your life requires your salary. Not just benefits from it, requires it. And this is the escalation spike. You're not working to build freedom. You're working to maintain your life. And once this happens, risk becomes dangerous. Change becomes uncomfortable. Opportunity becomes threatening. Because now, you can't easily step back. You can't easily pivot. You can't easily experiment. Your success becomes fragile. And this is where identity shifts again. You're not just ambitious anymore. You're dependent, and dependence feels responsible because everything looks stable until you realize you're building a life that only works if everything keeps working. And that's not freedom, that's maintenance. And this is where the final realization begins forming. 2. Confusing stability with progress. Your life looks stable, income is consistent, expenses are controlled, savings grow slowly, everything looks responsible. But here's the quiet question. Has your optionality increased? Has your freedom expanded? Has your timeline shortened? Or has your life just become more stable? Because stability feels like progress, but they're not the same. Progress reduces constraints. Stability maintains them. And this is where the realization deepens. You can become extremely stable without becoming free. Stable job, stable expenses, stable routine, stable life. But stability doesn't guarantee escape. And this is the final escalation. You didn't fall behind recklessly. You moved carefully in the wrong direction. And slowly, your responsible decisions created a stable future, not a free one. And now, everything leads to the final habit. Building a life that looks responsible, but is hard to leave. Your life looks good. Stable income, predictable routine, comfortable lifestyle. Everything appears responsible. But ask yourself something uncomfortable. How easily could you walk away from your job, from your obligations, from your lifestyle? Could you? Or would everything collapse? Because this is the final realization. You're not building freedom. You're building something harder to leave. A life that requires consistency, a life that depends on income, a life that resists change. And it all looked responsible. Every decision, every upgrade, every careful move, until you realized responsibility without leverage creates dependence. And dependence is slow, and slow costs years. Not dramatically, quietly. One responsible decision at a time. You didn't make reckless mistakes. You didn't overspend wildly. You didn't gamble your future. You did something harder to see. You built stability instead of freedom. And stability feels good, predictable, comfortable, responsible. But freedom feels different, uneven, uncertain, uncomfortable. And most people choose stability first because it looks smarter until they realize they're stable, but still waiting. Waiting for enough, waiting for freedom, waiting for later. And this is the quiet truth. Some responsible habits don't build wealth. They delay it. They stretch timelines. They slow trajectories. They create lives that look successful, but move slowly. And by the time you notice, years have passed. But this isn't the most dangerous part, because some decisions don't just slow you down. They quietly lock you in. They make change harder. They make freedom distant. They make responsible choices irreversible. And that's what we're exploring next. Top 10 money decisions that feel safe, but cost years. Because sometimes, the decisions that look smartest quietly shape the life you can't escape.